Hello there, and welcome to a very special podcast. This month, we welcome an old friend of mine, Bishi, and it's extraordinary. We met a while back at, I think it was a PRS dinner, and realised that we actually went to the same school together, albeit not at the same time. That same school was where James Horner went, albeit not at the same time, Holland Park Comprehensive. So I really look forward to introducing you to her and an amazing interview, but also a performance, something truly special for this channel. But just wanted to catch up with you first about stuff. What have we been up to? Well, the response to Dot's library has been absolutely incredible. And what we've really enjoyed about it is you sharing stuff that you're doing with it. And I know a lot of people say that they'll be interested to hear what you do with it. We genuinely are, not only from an artistic and kind of network point of view, but also because we can hear stuff that we then feel needs to be improved to make the experience that you have with these libraries that much easier, that much more fun, I guess. But the thing I really want to dwell on today as well is, whilst we've been focusing on sample libraries over the last few months as a means of keeping going, I want to reiterate that we really are planning a lot of stuff for this community, this network, whatever you want to call it, that's coming up. So do subscribe if you haven't done, and join us at thecrowhillcompany.com. Something that came up the other day on a live stream on my Instagram was talk of a place for us to go and chat and discuss stuff and share stuff. And I think that we're going to plump for a thing called Discourse, which will be coming your way soon. And the reason why I'm really gearing up for us to have a place to chat is I'm working on a couple of things. I can't say what, but they're so fucking exciting. So I can't wait to share those with you, but it'll give us reason to get together and hang out. In other news, we were hoping to come off beta for Vaults this month, but we are doing all sorts of technical stuff with Vaults that's going to make the experience so much better, but also so much more fun. So you'll just have to bear with us a little bit longer until we resume those monthly releases on Vaults. And we have... Simon, how many have we planned? We've got 12 already planned. Yeah. So there's 12 Vaults all lined up. We've picked the colours, and we're just waiting for the tech to come into place to make it the experience that we want it to be, because eventually it's going to become impossible to use if you're having to download everything every time you want something new. Also, a reminder, or indeed if you didn't know about this, we're doing our first Crow Hill Composer Walk up Crow Hill in Edinburgh on the 20th, which is summer solstice, to continue with a tradition I started a few years back. The details are linked in the video description down below, alongside an Eventbrite RSVP thing, which I'd really appreciate you to do RSVP, because we're going to go up a hill. If you can't make it up a hill, you can join us afterwards in a fieldy bit where there will be food and drinks, and I'm hoping maybe some music and maybe some news, but certainly the opportunity to network and get to know people, not only in the Central Belt in Scotland, but there will be people coming up from England, and I believe a couple of people coming over from the Mediterranean. So it'll be a wonderful opportunity for people to connect and celebrate this weird job that we've decided to do. So I'm going to hand over to Bishi and Anna, who's done a wonderful interview with her. I'm sure you'll agree that Bishi she's a one-off, but in the best possible way. And when we return, I'm going to proudly announce the winner of this month's Composer Challenge with a wonderful piece that uses all of our vaults, which again, we'll be adding to soon. Right, Bishi, over to you.
break the mirror, release the fear when I call her name. She says, how you gonna fight? How you gonna fight? How you gonna feel? 'Cause you're unstoppable. How you gonna fight? How you gonna fight? When will you believe you are the universe? She lives inside of me. Power indestructible. Believe, I believe. She lives inside of me. My musical journey really began with my mother. My mother, Susmita Bhattacharya, is a very respected contemporary classical singer. She's an expert in the music of a poet and a great legend of Indian culture called Rabindranath Tagore. And she emigrated in the 70s from India to the UK and was a part of a very vibrant scene of musicians who were all immigrants as well. And that has really bled into my experience as a musician, because I saw very high art forms be presented as something which is on a community level. So I grew up around music, and I was classically trained in the piano, and I was classically trained in Eastern and Western vocal music. In my teenage years, I started playing the bass guitar and I got into analog synths. I was discovered by a radical queer performance art band called Minty, who was started by performance artist Lee Bowery. I started my professional session career when I was 15. Then I started my professional DJ career when I was 17. I then was taken on by someone called Gaurav Mozumdar, who is the senior disciple of Ravi Shankar, and I started my serious sitar training when I was 18. So in my late teens, I had a combination of classical sitar training, was very involved in queer nightlife. And then I began my own label in my early 20s and have been releasing independently for the past 17 years. In Indian classical music, the most important instrument is the voice. So because it's an improvisatory art form, you need to be able to sing the ragas. Indian classical music is based on ragas. Ragas are melodic forms. They're a little bit like modes. They're more like, I guess, like the ingredients to, and the raga being like a beautiful platter of food. And so you have to learn how to sing the melodies, everything. Certainly in North Indian classical music, everything has to be memorized. So therefore you have to learn to sing everything. So as a singer, I just remember one day being in the car. I'd been to see a Ravi Shankar concert at the Barbican. And I just remember thinking, do you know, I'd really love to play that because it reminds me of singing. And that led me to start at the Bhavan, which is a very seminal cultural school in West Kensington. And then from there, I was taken on by Ravi Shankar's senior disciple, Gaurav Mozumdar.
Did you have any pushback putting these two worlds together, traditional and electronic? Did you have any reception from it?
I had a lot of pushback just because I was such a wild card in the fact that I was a club kid and I was DJing and I was involved in fashion and I was involved in performance art, and I wanted to play my instrument live on stage whilst I was singing. So I was on tour with a woman who was the engineer for Sigur Rós, and she showed me these incredible pickups where I could play live through an amplifier. Now, obviously, I route everything through my Ableton setup. But with some collaborators at the time, I made a guitar strap and we drilled into my little studio sitar here. And the studio sitar itself is half the size of an actual concert sitar. So I did everything that was offensive. Everything about that decision making was totally offensive. And I think it's taken years for people, for traditionalists to really understand what I'm doing. A lot of people thought I was being very gimmicky. A lot of people thought I was being very disrespectful and that I was cheapening the art form. But what I was actually doing was trying to take the art form into my own realm of songwriting and composing and performance. And the culture has totally changed. And I think the fact that I've won a few awards and been on the telly and been on BBC Radio, like these things, once you've got a little bit of media, everyone forgives you for everything.
You've obviously had our performance here. It'd be great to know how you developed your live setup.
Yes.
And the story of that.
So I started with my electric sitar, and the engineer for Sigur Rós, she introduced me to these AKG C411 contact mics, one for left, one for right. And we would put it originally through amplifiers that would feed back really badly. And I was very lucky in, I got to collaborate with Sean Ono Lennon. I sang on one of his horror movie soundtracks, but for a while I was improvising with various floating members of what was then floating members of the Plastic Ono band, and we would use the original Plastic Ono band HQ in Soho in Manhattan. And I just remember it was such a struggle to hear the sitar over everyone jamming together that's when I began my journey with my Ableton Push setup. So it just means that I can monitor everything through the Ableton Push, and I can add effects, and I can live loop with it. And so there's a lot more signal for people to be able to kind of improvise with that. So that's where that journey started. And I've really taken to Ableton like a fish to water, just because of all of its audio manipulation and its Max MS Pro or for live, or like MS Pro for live. I think that's the correct term. But all of the patches and audio manipulation, which I'd like to get a lot more into. But I find that you can do things with the electronic audio that I then often like to bounce and I like to put into my Logic projects. So it just means that I can live loop and everything can just be more audible for everybody, rather than the like tiny velocity that comes out of the amplifier and feeds back really hideously.
The track that you've just played for us just now,
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about it? I believe it's for a project that you've just done.
Yes.
And what's the name of the track as well? Tell us.
The name of the track that I performed today is Maya, She Lives Through Me. And it is the pop finale for a soundtrack which is much more classical electronic, inspired by horror movies, inspired by people like John Carpenter. And it's a soundtrack for a film called Maya, the Birth of the Superhero, which is a VR immersive short. It's directed by artists Polomi Barsu and CJ Clark. It won a special jury mention at Tribeca 2023 and was recently shortlisted at Cannes Immersive 2024. I've just come back from the Cannes Film Festival. It was absolutely incredible. The project centres around a teenage girl called Maya who is in East London. She transforms into a superhero with the arrival of her period. And the goddess of menstruation, voiced by the actress Indira Varma, opens Maya's eyes, and she shows her about how a period is stigmatized. There is period shame, there is period poverty, there is gender-based violence that women who have their period have to go through. And the film resolves in Maya understanding the power of her period and the magic of her period. And it's going to be available on the Oculus store from May 31st, I believe. So Maya was my first ever scoring job, and I absolutely love the experience. I'm one of those people, when I see a moving image, I hear music immediately. It must be a form of synesthesia. Music and visuals really go together. A lot of my work as a solo artist has a really strong visual component to how I create music. And actually, as someone who opted out of traditional music college, one thing I loved about Cubase and Logic and Ableton is that everything's so colourful and you can just see things. Whereas I think with a very formal classical training, you'd have to have all of this really strict knowledge of score reading, and, you know, you'd have to have all of this knowledge to communicate what you simply feel inside. Whereas I feel that doors and all of the ways in which music production has become so accessible to people can see what they feel inside, they can see on the screen. And that's really revolutionized how we all experience music collectively.
One of the many things we recommend at Crowhill when people are starting out is to connect with actual people.
Yes.
And from like networking and work out where you maybe fit in and actually can contribute. What are your thoughts on making friends, contacts and networking on your own beyond social media?
So I come from a background of nightclubs, and I went out every night of the week from as soon as I finished my A-levels right up to me starting my first label, and sort of beyond. I am a creature of nightlife. And every single one of those nightclub spaces has shut down just because of the way that London has been gentrified. It really started from the Olympics and then Brexit and then COVID. It's really shocking how nightlife has really suffered. And that makes me very sad. But there are lots of other spaces and there are lots of other collectives and other ways in which people are coming together. And I really encourage that. And as much as I support networking, I'm much more holistic. I think going out there, finding your tribe, making friends, that's the most important thing that you can do, because it's through your friendships that opportunities, doors, my first series for Channel 4, which I scored this year, Satyesh, the director, used to work for a magazine called Dazed and Confused. He saw me DJing on the queer scene when I was 19, and he was too shy to talk to me because he thought I was cool, but I was a child. So I did tell him that I'm not cool, I'm a child. I was a child then, like an insecure teenager. But it took, a few, maybe 10, 15 years for that job to come through. But he always, whatever I was doing had an impact. And now we're friends. And that just goes to prove how these long relationships that came through the club scene. We didn't necessarily start as friends then, but I've been scoring for some high-end fashion brands, people who have been dressing me and collaborating with me since I was a teenager. And it's all coming around now. The jobs are coming in now. But if we hadn't had the friendship, then the job wouldn't have happened, or the opportunity. And I feel very strongly about collectives of people. And, over COVID, I connected with so many incredible women, incredible composers. I really got to find so many people, but I really support the group meetup. Whether it's just everyone going for a drink in the pub, or people finding someone's house, or people finding a space, it's very energizing and very nurturing. And, you know, if you look at the history of, you know, 20th century art movements, people met in a salon, or they met in a coffee bar, or they just found somewhere to hang out. And making those connections is so important.
How important do you feel social media is in order to achieve success? Is it just about brand identity, or does it really lead to work and opportunities? What's your experience been?
I think the main thing you have to have is ideas, and your ideas have to have depth and they have to have meaning, because there's an awful lot of success in social media which is based on things which are utterly superficial and utterly meaningless. And I would encourage people just to try and put that, unless they want to be a straight influencer, unless they just want to be known for being very hot, and that is valid. But I'm guessing that most composers and musicians and artists around the Crowhill community are people who have a lot of substance, people who care about issues, people who have a lot of depth and want to convey a lot of meaning, or are very invested in culture. And that is the most important thing, because if you don't have that, you're never going to have the opportunities. Personally, I love social media. I'm probably on it a bit too much. But it's really the ideas that you're creating, all of the content that you create, everything that you do. Rather than think about your personal brand, I'd say just think about your meaning and think about your cultural value. Think about the pillars of what makes you up creatively, and then use that as a way to guide your social media. And then you'll find your tribe, and then you'll find people. Whereas if you're just jumping on trends and just doing things for attention, I think it makes people really unhappy. And I've seen it really affect people's mental health very badly. And I think all of us on social media, all of us on the internet, we have to start thinking of it like alcohol addiction or sugar addiction, because our devices are made to be very addictive and to cut into our normal lives and to make us distracted, and we're all constantly checking our phones. And it's not really our fault, because the world of work has made it so that we have to constantly be checking. But I think there are going to be increasingly people checking their addiction and likening it to, just drinking too much alcohol or having too much sugar. And we all have to be really very aware of that. But I remember being in LA once, and my drag queen wife, I was feeling really lost. And my drag queen wife said to me, you know, she was like, Boo, you have to sit down and write out all of the projects, write out everything you like doing, write out all of your projects, write out everything that you enjoyed, write about what really worked, what really didn't, and really identify where your core values are. And that's going to really tell you what you need to do in life, or where your career, like where your creativity needs to go next. And I would employ that in social media, because it has become so important, and it can be a real struggle for people.
How did you find the contrast and the difference between the skills of being a composer, a performer, to then media composing?
Well, it's interesting, because I really feel that I've taken all of my skills as a singer-songwriter and as a performer. So much of what you do is about reading an audience and feeling an audience. So when you've got rushes in front of you, you're really feeling about emotional responses. How can I underpin? How can I pull the audience into the emotional journey of the story that's in my visuals? How can I get people to emotionally engage and really relate to the characters? how can I highlight and pinpoint the drama within each scene. So I really feel like I've taken those skills into scoring. But one of the things that I really enjoy about scoring for media is that it's not about my front presentation. It's not actually about me. I'm very much embedded into the process, and I'm a very key component to how people are going to engage with visual media, but it's not actually anything to do with me, which I've really enjoyed. I found it really relaxing. I mean, even though I do love presentation, I do love performing and putting myself forward, I find it very relaxing for it not to be about me. Earlier this year, I got to score my first ever TV series, and it was a 3-part documentary series for Channel 4 called Defiance, Fighting the Far Right. The TV series charts how the South Asian community fought back to far right abuse and far right uprisings. And this is the story of how the South Asian community fought back. And it takes place between 1976 to 1981. So this is just before my sister and I were born. So very much the protests that happened in Brick Lane and in Bradford and in Southall were very much a part of the paranoia that my sister and I grew up. We knew that there were members of society who were just not on our side, and we knew that there were dangerous areas of London that were really not safe for South Asian people. But however, this is the first time in history that these stories have been told, and so it was a real honour to be able to score these stories. And oh, look, the dogs are here. And you can watch the 3-part series both on Channel 4, on their streaming series, on their streaming platform, or you can watch all 3 episodes are on YouTube on the documentary segment of the Channel 4 YouTube website. And it was an absolute honour. I was really inspired by Shostakovich's Chamber Symphony and the industrial music of Throbbing Gristle. And I thought I would take my sort of British Indian influences, my club influences, my classical influences, my influences from Bulgarian vocal music, but I would somehow channel it through Shostakovich's Chamber Symphony, which I find terrifying and amazing, and through the industrial music of the late 70s, which was really prevalent at the time that these events were happening. And it's a very, very important piece of social justice, of British social justice history that I feel very strongly that everybody should learn about.
Did your work at the BFI doing live accompaniments to silent movies, was that a good way of cutting your teeth into this media composing world?
So very early in my career, I had the opportunity to score the silent film Salome, which is a 1920s silent movie classic starring Alla Nazimova, who's an LGBTQ plus icon. And that was a really great way for me to cut my teeth and enter into the world of scoring. The way in which I would write songs is very much to make backing tracks. And a lot of those backing tracks seem to be very symphonic in the way that I write. So it seemed to really complement moving image. And the producers I was working with at the time were really encouraging to me. They would listen to my demos and would always encourage me that my demo writing, that the demos were so good. They didn't really feel like demos. They just needed to be pushed a little bit, to be finished products, and I lacked the confidence, and I lacked the technical knowledge at that point. But I would say that was a really good way to start this journey.
We touched on a little bit there, but what's your writing process and where do you take most inspiration from for your music?
At the moment, I really enjoy using loop pedals and making choral pieces just out of my voice. That's a way that I really like to write. I'm very inspired by composers like Meredith Monk. I also sang with the London Bulgarian Choir early on in my career, so I'm very invested in Eastern European harmonic textures. I love the work of Bartok. I love Stockhausen's choral pieces. There's all kinds of choral work. I love the work of composers like Caroline Shaw. I also really like to improvise with my sitar and different electronic drones. I do a lot of live looping with my Ableton setup, so that's something I really enjoy. Early on in my career, I was writing a lot on the piano and on ukulele, because I think ukuleles were maybe a bit of a thing during that indie sleaze period. I've recently got back into playing my bass guitar and jamming with my bass and singing over the top. So there really are a number of different ways. I also love to just experiment with synth sounds. I think sometimes I think different synths and different sounds just have a way of opening you up, so you write in different ways. But I'm endlessly fascinated. I've even been going through Splice and finding beats to improvise over, just because I think, why not?
Speaking about, like, you talk about your projects there and picking out which ones, is there any that you have coming up in the future that you particularly feel like is very much where you feel powerful and strong?
Yes, I have a number of different exciting projects coming up. So I've recently sang on producer Tony Visconti's album Apollo 80, which was released to celebrate his 80th birthday. So happy birthday, Tony. It's incredible to have you as a friend and as a collaborator. I'm going to be performing Yoko Ono's voice piece for soprano on the Park stage at Glastonbury on the Friday of Glastonbury around midday. So everybody please come and get ready to scream. It's an incredibly cathartic piece. I performed it in the Tate Modern's Turbine Hall with about 1,000 people screaming in unison, and that was really magical. I am a part of the first EP of a Scottish singer-songwriter collective called Hen Hoose, and Hen Hoose platform the voices of female, trans and non-binary artists. So I've written a collaboration with Inga Thompson, and that comes out on June 5th. I am also working with the University of Sheffield on an AI composer tool, which I'm slowly developing with them. I'm also working on a music and coding project with Sonic Pi, and the aim is to get young school kids to learn about coding with music. And we hope to roll out this project in India to get more little girls involved in tech and coding. So I'm really excited about all of that. And yeah, watch this space in October, November. There are going to be some gigs related to Maya, the Birth of a Superhero. So yeah, watch this space. You can find me. I've got a newsletter on my website, bishy.co.uk. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter as Bishy Official. On Twitter, it's Bishy_official, but I'm very easy to find online.
Bishy, thanks so much for coming all this way to talk to us and to share your music with us. I'm so sorry. It was just hysterical. You travelled up from London to be here just as I travelled down to London, so we missed each other. So catch up for a beer soon, either here in London or somewhere in between. And I'd like to also congratulate and do a virtual beer with Phil Bartie, who has won this month's Composer Challenge. And the challenge this month was to use all of the vaults. And what we really loved about your demo was how you cast a spotlight onto the various different voices within vaults, whilst also combining what is quite an esoteric group of instruments together in a wonderful composition that's been wonderfully produced. So congratulations to you. And if you're interested in these composer challenges, we're going to be so much more active with the network. As I said before, we've just been getting this business up and running, sorting out HR departments, this, that, and the other. We're going to be so much more hands-on once we have a place to chat. And composer challenges, we're going to focus on a lot more and maybe discuss how we can get the best out of our demos, that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for watching this slightly shorter podcast this month. We'll be doing another one next month. Also, please come and join us on the 20th if you can come across or up or down to Edinburgh, and do subscribe. There's so much exciting stuff coming up. So thanks for watching to the end, and I'll see you next time, hopefully on the hill on the 20th.